accepted as a normal international law, especially by the countries of the global south, because of the legacy of colonialism and imperialism. And this new doctrine will still find it difficult because it still lends itself to being hijacked by the powers that be for their imperial purposes, however well designed the language might be. And I also argue that the case of Libya might be a decisive obstacle to the progress and development of this doctrine of responsibility to protect. So for me, international law as a legacy of Western imperialism in the global south is grossly deficient in helping us build peace and manage conflicts in the global south. I'll give an example of Bakassi. The people of Bakassi, as far as my analysis is concerned, are still not human beings under international law. They are still tied by the shackles of the lines that were drawn at Berlin when black people were considered as subhuman, not having the capacity to rise above the ability of a 7-year-old child. It's something I shall return to because in the course of my research I discovered a lot of things that influence international law, the structuring of the global order, and the way it has affected our methods of peace. Now, it has taken me to this new approach of cognitive justice. What is cognitive justice? It's a high-sounding couple of words. Cognitive justice is a theory of justice grounded on the idea of human diversity and plurality. Now, in expounding on my approach to peace building based on cognitive justice, you will find that my positions, the position of my research, and those who belong to this school of thought, differs significantly from what the UN Rapporteur on Peace Building will tell you, from what the government thinks are the basis for peace building in Nigeria. I take a perspective that is quite different because of what cognitive justice is. It has been defined as the recognition of the right of different forms of knowledge to coexist. A recognition of plurality, that is, plurality is when you have more than one tribe, more than one religion. A recognition of plurality that goes beyond mere tolerance or liberalism to an active recognition of the need for diversity. It demands the recognition of knowledge as ways of life, not only as methods, but also as people's way of living and perceiving their world. Because for us in cognitive justice, the link between survival and the way people understand their world are very closely connected. Now, scholars that have advocated for the notion of cognitive justice include Professor Shi Viswanathan, who is Indian, Professor Boaventura de Souza Santos, who is a European, he's Polish, but interestingly, he seems to have a subaltern mind because of his own research. Also, Kra, Belden, and Rajan, amongst others. Now, these scholars take the North-South divide. For them, the global North, America and Europe, has taken it upon itself to make itself the supreme, the valid, the right, the standard, and anything else only holds relevance to the extent that it strives to make itself like the West. Santos, you find to be quite a different person. He says that Europe and America has been teaching the world for over 500 years. But now, it has this problem of economic crisis that it cannot solve. It could probably learn from other conceptions of the world, other ways of viewing the world. But having taught the world for over 500 years, it has probably lost the capacity for learning from the experiences of other parts of the world. Now, these scholars they focus on the North-South dichotomy. But for me, thinking of my own society where I come from, Nigeria, Kaduna State, this part of the country that is constantly being threatened by greater scales of human calamity in terms of conflict, I thought of how to domesticate this idea and valorize it into peace building and international law. And therefore, my research adds a domestic dimension to the concept of cognitive justice by examining and dissecting the concept within the domestic setting with a view to bringing its principles to bear in fashioning a more effective peace-building legal framework. Now with this, the West, the scholars of cognitive justice will talk about the experience of Europe being re-Christian to be called the universal standard to which everyone should assume. Now at the domestic scene, I also say that these lines of perception of difference and how the colonial experience has somehow affected the South has made it in such a way that the lines of difference are potential front lines of conflict. And therefore, there is the high likelihood of domestic imperialism, many cases of which Professor Intelli-studio has made mention. And for me, constructing our society from a view of the world that ignores our fundamental diversity is a recipe for disaster. No matter how much we continue to talk about peace building, for me, it is a Sisyphusian task. Sisyphus was someone in Greek mythology who was cursed. His curse was that he's going to roll up the stone up the hill, and each time he goes almost to the top, he's going to roll back and he's going to do it again. I think that is what we have been doing. Now, according to Velden, she says she aptly captures the definition of cognitive justice by saying it is the notion that different forms of knowledge or their knowers should be treated as equal. Now, if treatment of difference as equal is cognitive justice, treatment of difference on equal terms would therefore be cognitive injustice. Now, I started by telling you to imagine that you were all of the same identity in this world, and then you were two identities. Now, imagine that if there were, for every two people, there was a different identity in this place. How diverse this place would be. Now, if you were to legislate for this place, coming from your own particular conception of the world, what would you do with that? Would you try to make everyone become like you? Or would you rather legislate in such a way that diversity is reflected in your legislation and respected? And then you begin to build your idea of a unified society from this understanding of diversity and respect for difference. This is the basis for my research in cognitive justice. Now, Professor Boaventura de Sousa Santos produced a presentation. He is quite unique. How did the European come to promote the idea that somebody who is categorized as a savage, as somebody who is backward, uncivilized, in the global south, could have any idea that could be equated on any level with the Western world? Santos did his sociological fieldwork in Brazil among the Indians, who live mostly in the forest. He lived amongst them to study their ways as a student of sociology. He learned their language, he lived with them. As he told us in class, he made his research in such a way that they didn't even know he was doing any research, because sociological researchers will normally be taking notes, and everyone in society will have. That is the researcher. Santos took a different approach. He dressed like them. He never took notes when anyone would know he was taking notes. He took his notes at night. He joined them in their religious rites. He understood their language and their cosmovision. Cosmo means world. Vision means the way you see things. Cosmovision, the way you view the world. And he came up with this theory. There are different cosmovisions. And one cannot be entirely right, especially when it begins to interact with another. Now, on this note, I also try to develop certain basic principles of cognitive justice around which we can begin to think of constructing a peaceful world, a peaceful society that embraces that multiplicity and harmony and peaceful coexistence. The three principles are as follows. First, the recognition of difference as ways of life. Second, the need for intercultural translation. And the third is a plurality of alternative solutions and paths to problem solving. Now, recognition of difference as ways of life demands that every identity must be respected as fully human, as equal to any other. Now, what do you mean by identity? A knowledge, a way of life. For me, every group of people who perceives itself and identifies itself as different from another, and therefore likely to raise barriers between itself and another, should be treated as different. And in treating the lines of interaction between this group and any others, the necessary measures should be put in place to